Okay, so now we're in the next section where we're going to be talking about HTTP at a glance. As a software developer, it's important for you to understand the concepts. You have to understand how the web works in order to build safe applications and making sure that it's a great user experience. So if you're new to this channel and you'd like to follow along with the curriculum, the link is in the description. Let's get into it. HTTP at a glance. While web developers can often get away with a minimum understanding of TCP/IP and DNS, they must understand HTTP much more deeply. Before diving into the details of HTTP, let's gain a high-level understanding. Request and response. You got to understand request and response because it's definitely something you need to understand when it comes to fetching data. So the fundamental units of HTTP are request and response. A client, usually a web browser, makes a request to a web server. Based on the details of the request, the server formulates and sends a response. The response is parsed and displayed by the browser. HTTP request, HTTP response. The computer, your laptop, your machine, your browser makes a request to the server, which is the HTTP, and it sends back a response. It's important that you understand how this works because it's going to help you better write your code, better fetch your data, understand how to parse your data, because we're going to be doing a lot of requests for a lot of responses. So as we go a little bit deeper, as long as the server is available, every request receives a single response. Requests contain several types of data, including the URL being requested, the type of action the client is asking the browser to take, metadata about the request, such as the type of browser making the request, and the type or types of data the client can accept in return. Optionally, a request message. Now, that's the request. The responses include the status of the response, which we will go over those different types of responses that you'll get back, and those come in codes, status codes, including success or failure reasons. Metadata about the response, including the size and data format of the responses messages. Optionally, a response message. Now, as we get deeper into understanding this, let me do a little inspection here so you can kind of see what I'm saying. We will go over here to the network. And here in the network, I need to refresh the page so you can see what the network is doing. This is, your inspector tool is very powerful. It gives you a lot of information on what it is that you are working with. So here inside the network, it's telling me all of these different things that I have status codes for. These are the statuses: 300, 304, 200, meaning these are all successful. And that's what you want. You want as much success as you possibly can. And 304, we'll go over these status codes with each one of them meaning. As you can see, it sends me back a lot of information. I'm requesting the response.png, and so it's requesting information from the server, and it's sending me back the information, letting me know that they were successful. This is what it's talking about. It's important that you get familiar with this tool as well, because as a developer, this is going to help you troubleshoot some things as well. So as we go down to the next part, the postal service of the internet, this is what the HTTP is representing. HTTP can seem complicated, but it is actually very similar to a system that you are already familiar with, the United States Postal Service. This is why I said earlier on when we first started teaching you about programming and introducing the curriculum to you, it's better for you to be able to associate the concepts with what you already understand and what you've already been exposed to and you have experience with. Well, HTTP, we're comparing it to the Postal Service. So, suppose you want to mail a letter to your friend in Alaska, asking them their favorite cheese. To do so, you write your question on a piece of paper and enclose it in an envelope. On the envelope, you write your friend's address along with your return address. Finally, you affix a stamp to the top right corner. This is the syntax of it. Now, you may be a part of a younger generation where you may not mail letters, and this concept may not be familiar with you, but you do understand how to send an email. For us and my generation and before and prior, we were familiar with writing letters. They taught us how to mail a letter in school. And so here, for people in our age group, we understand this concept. Maybe a little bit different for you in your younger age group because, again, you're using text and you're using email. So you may not use this form of sending information to someone. But HTTP uses this type of concept. So do librarians. They use some type of organization concept as well. So imagine is the image in the public domain. This image is in the public domain, is what they're saying. Now, each of these pieces of information is necessary for your letter to be delivered. If you don't write this correctly, if you don't give it a return, you don't have to give it a return, but you do have to give it an address. They have to know where they're going to mail it to or where they're going to send it to. But this is the return to sender just in case they don't deliver it. You want it to be sent back to you. Well, you're familiar with that in your emails. It's a bounce back. If you send an email and that address doesn't exist, it's going to send it back to you and tell you it doesn't exist. Over here, you have the postage stamp. This is to let the postal service know that you've already paid for this particular envelope for them to mail it. This is how they got paid, or this is how they get paid. And then they put this stamp on to let you know that it's been received and the date it was received, so that if it gets sent back to you, you have all these different markings to let you know that, okay, the attempt was made if they couldn't find the address. So it could be your error that you didn't put the correct address in it, or it could just be the person didn't want to receive the letter. Now, as we see here, when the letter entered the postal system, all right, so when your letter enters the postal system, it will travel from one post office to another via land, air, or maybe even sea. As long as you follow their rules, the postal service will get your letter to its destination. Remember, rules. HTTP has rules just like the postal service has rules, just like passing your email has a rule. You have to follow the rules. This is very similar to how an HTTP request works. The letter is like a request message. The envelope contains the location and metadata needed for the letter to be delivered. Just like an HTTP request specifies a URL and other metadata necessary for the request to reach the server and be processed. When you drop the letter in your mailbox, you're not probably familiar with that. Years ago, for all the younger generation, we used to have mailboxes everywhere. You don't have them like that anymore. You know it will be delivered since you followed the Postal Service's rules. When we make HTTP requests, we don't know how our request will get to the server, but as long as we were properly structured a request, it will be delivered. So as long as you properly structured it, it will be delivered. Here's a little image on the process, the difference between a mailroom and the servers right here, or the network. Both the Postal Service and the Internet deliver messages as long as you follow their formatting rules. Images used with permission. L via U.S. Air Force, remember which is left, right, via Flickr user org. So this is a network of servers. And just as your friend will respond with a letter telling you their favorite cheese, sharp white cheddar, an HTTP request will result in a response from the server. We call mailing regular letters snail mail because it takes time. But back in the day, we were used to that. We were used to things taking time. Nowadays, everything is instant, pretty much instant. So I won't go on my soapbox on that one. But if you're from my generation and us earlier, prior, you understand what I'm conveying. As we wade into the details of HTTP, keep this analogy in mind. It will help simplify the concepts and make them more concrete. So again, check your understanding. That's the end of this section. Like we're saying, associate something that you already know and understand with what we're going to teach you. So to better understand how HTTP works with requests and responses, think about or associate it with something that makes sense to you. Okay, so that's the end of this video. If more you do, the more you improve. See you in the next section.